So today's session is part 3 of 4. Today we're going to be talking about the path to supply chain resiliency, and specifically, we're going to be going into supply. My name is Jeffrey Porter. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at StockIQ Technologies. Been in the industry for quite a number of years, deep experience in supply chain, and passionate about serving others. I'm pleased to be joined by Tim Wise today. And Tim, I'll go ahead and let you provide an introduction.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Good morning, everyone. Tim Wise with Tight Lines Consulting and Coaching. As with Jeffrey, long tenure in international supply chains, helping manufacturers and distributors work on their financial and operational goals. Got a really deep background in finance and supply chain. And, I live in Colorado, so I love to fly fish and kind of an outdoor enthusiast like Jeffrey as well.
Yeah, so today's session, as we mentioned, part 3 of 4. Today we're going to be talking about supplier management. We're going to be talking about 3 levels: commodity items, critical suppliers, and then strategic suppliers. We are going to be going into some key takeaways at the end of the session, but I'm going to hand it directly over to Tim. We're going to get directly into the meat of the topic today, and certainly submit Q&A. So if you have a question, we invite you to submit that. We'll do our best to answer it. Tim, would you like to take us through the various levels of SRM or supplier relationship management?
All suppliers are not created equal. They're all important at some level. If you're buying anything for your product lines and offering those up for customers, obviously they're important. But when it comes to supplier relationship management, I like to look at them through these 3 lenses. Your commodity suppliers are, typically you're going to have multiple suppliers. Lots of choices here. You might be more just in a PO transactional relationship with them. Doesn't mean that you don't have a good relationship and you don't do some other things. It just means that, maybe there's not as much risk here for your supply. As far as critical suppliers, now we're getting down to maybe you had to qualify this supplier. Maybe you've got some custom packaging or some other type of component that you designed. You may have options, right, as far as where you get the source of supply from. Typically a lower to medium investment. And these suppliers are probably going to be a little bit higher in your spend from a pricing and perspective and also from your volume. And then, of course, your strategic suppliers, these are ones that are probably pretty critical to your business and your success. Significant investment potentially to qualify them. These can include contract manufacturer, co-mans, maybe your 3PL is in this category. If you design this product and it's at a co-man, if it's your formula that you've given them to manufacture specialty items, maybe you have a single source for this item, right? That doesn't mean any item that's single source probably needs a little bit more attention than, depending on how you're classifying these relative to your spend or volume, which is where a lot of people go to first. But, single sourced items, even if they're low cost and maybe low volume, they can still trip you up, right? If you need those to meet customer requirements. And as you can see on the right, the collaboration partnership, it's lower for the commodity, much higher for the strategic suppliers.
Tim, just a question. We've just come out of a pretty volatile time here over the last 2.5 years as it relates to supply. Have you seen any shifts or changes or in the overall collaboration and partnership or the shifting of these sources? So anything changed here recently?
I think the biggest thing that's changed over the last 6 to 9 months is that the economy's kind of taken a little bit of a dip. And as a result, you're starting to see a lot of things that were potentially having problems getting supply. They're coming back more in balance with what's really needed. In fact, we're coming out of probably excess situations in some situations. It really depends on your supplier and your business and what your commodities are and what you're trying to source. But I would say now things have started the volatility is starting to settle down. Hearing as many labor shortages that kind of might talk to a supplier capacity, not hearing about as many logistics challenges, et cetera, heard over the last couple of years.
Gotcha. And then what about offshoring, nearshore, onshore? Any shift or dynamics going on in there?
Yeah, I think for certain businesses, there is a lot of interest and even execution to bring things back closer to the customer, be it either suppliers, could be simply maybe a final configuration process in the region that is more doing a configure to stock or configure to order. I would think there are some commodities, maybe in electronics, especially, that are going to be very difficult to reshore. But certainly people are looking for more opportunity to be closer, same time zone, or even Mexico, South America is a good option for North American options to get that supply. So I would say that there is a move in that direction. I would say that it's not a huge move in that direction. I think there's a lot of interest. I think the execution is yet to be fully realized.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that feedback.
For key processes with suppliers, right? I've kind of broken them down into three areas: forecasting and planning. I think, this could be as simple as sending monthly forecast updates, obviously net of your inventory, 6 to 12 month horizon to your key suppliers. I would certainly recommend this for your critical and strategic suppliers. Metrics, right? Some common ones, right? On-time delivery, quality, cost, how responsive they are some of the more common ones. And then business reviews. This could be monthly, probably not, probably more like quarterly or semi-annually, but these are just formal ways of having a structured agenda with updated, could be just updated business topics. It could be, just diving into history. It could be looking at the cost trends of your certain industries or commodities, but it's also a chance to really, get to know your supplier's business just as well as they know it, right? I'm always an advocate of, like, if they have, like, you can't know everything about your supplier, but the more you know, the better off you can mitigate any risk. We've all had that call that says, hey, I'm not going to get my supply because, whatever, a machine went down, or I had a capacity constraint that maybe they had planned all along that you didn't know anything about. So these are the three areas that I think are key for strategic relationship management. And I really can't emphasize the forecasting and planning. Suppliers like to know what's coming. And if you can give them that, it gives them, a better opportunity to meet your needs. And they're going to be much more receptive on a relationship perspective, potentially even to give you some priority because of this relationship you have with them.
Great. Yeah, very good point there, Tim. I know a number of our clients were utilizing some of the forecasting abilities within StockIQ to send their suppliers, especially when we were in a tight situation and there was a limited capacity. And basically that insight moved them up to the top of the food chain when it came down to supplying, from the standpoint that they knew the quantities, they valued the relationship, and it allowed them to get product faster than other folks. So
No.
I would agree. I think this is immensely helpful. Question for you on that 6 to 12 month horizon. What would dictate the difference between sending somebody a 6 month versus a 12 month or a 9 month?
Well, some of it has to do with your data availability and what you're doing with your forecasting and planning process. I personally gravitate towards 12 months. I think further out in time, the forecasts tend to get a little more unpredictable. 6 months, if you have a 3 month lead time or even an 8 week lead time, that would also be an input into how much visibility you want to give your suppliers. I like 12, but again, once you get out 9, 10, 11, the data might not have as much relevance. The lead time is one of the things I key in on, right? Either lead time for just what I would call standard lead time. I've had situations where as the lead time goes out, right? Especially during COVID, we had lead times pushing out over time. you want to give them a longer horizon to match that lead time for sure. Some lead times we're pushing out 9, 12, 15, 16 months. And, without understanding your needs, it's going to be hard for them to plan what they're going to supply. So those are some of the variables I look at when trying to decide if it's 6 or 12.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And to be clear, this is a monthly forecast of your planned purchases, not
Correct.
of your planned usage and or your demand. So as
That's
you've
fair.
noted in here, we need to net out inventory, we need to net out what's on hand, what's in the pipeline, and then balance that against our forecasted demand and usage.
Yeah, it needs to take into consideration, obviously, the open POs you have already open with them that are more like the commitment. The PO is the commitment, right? The forecast is information for business planning. The PO is the actual commitment that, hey, I want this product, ship it to me.
Okay. So question for you about if folks on the phone here haven't implemented one of these processes yet, what has been your experience when first approaching one of your key suppliers about starting to conduct, a regular review process? How would you get started in that? What's typically been the reaction or the leading, what you would consider best practice when approaching this topic?
Especially for businesses that maybe are relying on, some really key suppliers, I would typically start there, either be it strategic or critical or, a large part of your spend. But, have a plan for how you want to engage with them. I think most suppliers I've experienced are very open, right, to having this dialogue, right? Especially if you're a growing business and they want to garner more of your business. They're very open to exchanging information, spending some time talking about performance, cost. I know a lot of these relationship management processes can just turn into a cost conversation. And while cost is really important, if you're going to use it just to negotiate costs, that's certainly part of the intent, but it's really also to de-risk your supply chain around supply, right? And create some resiliency with your suppliers. But most of the time I see suppliers very willing to engage. They're very, especially ones that maybe they get surprised by you with maybe upside in demand, and you give them a PO and all of a sudden it's like, even 15, 20, 30% increases can throw them off. I think they're going to be very open to that. But I would start with, 1 to 3 suppliers, have a plan on how you want to engage them, frequency, what type of data you want, what type of metrics might be important, right? And I wouldn't try to boil the ocean here. I'd pick 1 or 2, maybe 3 that are really important to you. And that way, something like quality or cost or on-time delivery, typically what happens is you're going to, if you have a problem with the supplier, of course you're going to engage with them, but now all you're doing is talking about problems, right? And certainly you want to correct those, but at the same time, you want to be able to develop an opportunity to have some collaboration and create some ongoing performance improvement opportunities. And look, I mean, this is a point where you also can have the tough conversations, right? Hey, this is not really working for us. We may need to do something different. And, to be honest with you, these business reviews and this ongoing communication makes those conversations a little bit easier as well.
Great points. And you bring up a really key concept in here. This isn't an opportunity to squeeze the vendor for pricing. This isn't the reason or the objective that we engage. We engage with these suppliers with the specific intent of developing a relationship to drive down our overall total cost, maybe not necessarily the price or the cost of the individual unit. I think you have some great suggestions out in here. Would you mind taking us down through a sample scorecard?
Yeah. So, this is, there's a lot of metrics on here that you could use, right, to review with the supplier. You could talk about transit if they're covering the inbound logistics associated with the supply. You could talk about transit. You could talk about their on-time delivery. Are they basically delivering when they say they would? EDI compliance. Maybe you've got an EDI relationship with them, and you're having some data transfer issues, right? Label compliance, this could be a big one, right? If you've got some labeling requirements for, managing inbound receipts in your warehouse or any other types of logistical supply chain process opportunities, right? On-time shipment, quality is a big one. If you're having a lot of fallout, maybe you're not doing any inspection, maybe you're waiting till you get it on your line, or maybe you're having customer fallout, who knows, right? But that's an important one. And then shipment accuracy, right? Are they sending you what you wanted and in the amount you wanted, right? SKU fill rate, line fill rate, similar metrics in doing those. But like I said, I think on-time delivery, quality, shipment accuracy, and maybe your transit or order fill rate might be good places to start.
Great. Yeah. I like that idea of not boiling the ocean. You're likely going to be searching for information and data around these.
Yep.
My experience in working with our clients and working directly with vendors is this isn't conjecture, it's not subjective, it needs to be objective information and sharing that type of information. We actually have like to share with you some information that StockIQ produces, give you a sample of examples of things that we're measuring specifically as it comes to on time and in full, how they're actually performing. So, all righty. So let's talk about a vendor scorecard. So in StockIQ solution, one of the things that we're doing is we are measuring all of our suppliers' performance. And as an example, we're looking at things like the total number of orders that we've received. How many of those orders were perfect, meaning they delivered on time and they delivered all of the individual line items. So an order service level is a pretty tough metric because if there's anything at issue with any of those orders, it's going to be a tough measure. We can also introduce the concept of how many order lines and how many of those lines were perfect. You will note in here that our line service level is a little bit higher from the standpoint that I might have 50 lines on an order. Well, if I had one of those line items wrong on the total order, I get 0 credit for that order from a perfect perspective. The other thing that we can monitor is how many of those are on time and how many of those are late. Information that's discrete, it can be typically tracked back, or we're utilizing discrete order level information where we're tracking the dates that they were sent and shipped. One of the key elements in all of this is making sure that you have accurate information and it's being updated. We don't want to approach suppliers with information that's not accurate. It can taint the process, right? We want to come forward with accurate and complete information. So an example of some of the things that we can measure from the supply perspective. Lead time is another factor that will greatly impact how we are planning and how we're ordering. I once heard one of our very astute clients talk about expect the average and you plan for the worst in all of this. Doing that requires that you monitor your vendor's performance. So one of the things to note out in here is I'm picking in on a specific SKU, and this specific SKU, we have various lead times that are active right now. Oftentimes, by the way, these are captured in your ERP system, but important to know what the vendor has quoted you. This is what I would suggest. The vendor's quoted us a certain manufacturing time, a certain shipping lead time, and we may also get into an expedite. Tim mentioned about these relationships that we engage in with our suppliers. One of the great things is when we start collaborating, if we need favors and we need to expedite, this oftentimes is one of those things that these suppliers are willing to do when we've invested the time in them. The next aspect of this is measuring. How are we doing on this particular line item? Are we experiencing that 28-day planning lead time? Is it shifting, meaning they're delivering faster than the shipping is? And again, this is based on monitoring and capturing the various levels in here of when did we release the PO? Did we get any movement out on that? What were the actual lead times on there? Were they late? Were they early? How many of them were? It's always helpful to have that detail behind here to get at the details. Tim, anything you'd like to call out in either the vendor scorecard here or the lead time management?
Yeah, I just think having technology that you can actually rely on and keep accurate data, goes a long way in these conversations with your suppliers, especially, if you're going to be doing a quarterly, semi-annual business review. You really want to make sure that you've got this data. And this also would cut down on, having to go collate and gather the data for those reviews, right? And that's one of the concerns I think a lot of people have is, where am I getting this data? How long is it going to take me to get it? This obviously expedites that process.
Yeah, great point there, Tim. Data oftentimes can be the failure point in a lot of these processes, in that if it takes a lot of time to collect this, be aware of that, because if we're trying to do a regular review out in here, it can be the stumbling block in that overall effort. I'll also say another key component in all of this is making sure that if we get updates to delivery times, shipping times, making sure that that information is being captured so that we have the ability to accurately measure. We don't want to get into a contest of validating whether the information that we're evaluating is correct or incorrect. So we want to start with that basis. The next thing I'd like to talk about in here, you talked about a vendor forecast. And one of the things when doing a vendor forecast is understanding exactly what we plan on ordering from a specific vendor. What we're looking at in here within the system, in fact, let me give you just a little bit of a background as to how this gets developed. So imagine when we are generating a replenishment schedule for a particular SKU from a vendor, we are establishing our safety stock levels, our order policies, and our order cycle. And ultimately, we come up with a replenishment schedule, which is how frequently will I be buying from that vendor and in what quantities to meet my forecasted demand. Now, in this view, the vendor may be interested in a monthly number. They may be interested in a little bit more discrete, a weekly view. But essentially, this is the planned replenishment request to meet our safety stocking goals, to meet our order cycle, and to meet our forecasted demand and or open orders. So when we talk about developing this forecast, what we're talking about are the planned orders that we have on the horizon by date and by quantity to meet that forecasted demand for that period. What's nice about the technology then is being able to come in and say, which vendor am I generating this for? So I can pick my vendor, my distributor out in here, and then I can start specifying the information that I want included on this report. So what I'm choosing to do out in here is pick a specific period on my horizon. I'm moving out in monthly buckets at this point. By the way, a weekly is available as well. And I am looking at those planned purchase quantities. So in this scenario, what we're doing is we're aggregating by month, and we're looking at the overall planned releases during that individual period. And we're doing it for that supplier, and we're doing it for each and every SKU that we purchase from them. So one of the things that you will note is, for instance, on this SKU right in here, here is my planned releases to that vendor. And by the way, these are not firm orders that are in place, but these are plans that I'm putting in place. And it's generating this report of my forecasted replenishment from that vendor by SKU. So very, very helpful in being able to align our expectations around overall total buy. And I would imagine that this is greatly helpful, knowing that depending on their lead time, now they can begin planning for raw material, for capacity, and other issues.
Yeah, I think the key here is, right, is that this is now connected to your product plan and your demand plan, right? And it's integrated, right? Because, SKUs come and go, products come and go. The key things you should be talking about with your suppliers: what's my product plans, what's my portfolio look like, and what's going to be the impact on their supply plan to them as you move through this process. So really key to have that integrated with your demand and product plan.
Yeah, very, very good point there, Tim. So a monthly cadence on sending them this forecast may or may not be appropriate, right? Maybe it's more frequent if we go through major changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great thing. The other thing that I wanted to communicate in here as well is you can imagine internally in the organization, we need to be able to plan for these as well. So one of the helpful things about being able to introduce this concept of supplier forecast is we can share this internally with our finance team, meaning, hey, I'm getting ready, or this is the planned purchases from this vendor by individual SKU, and I can see my overall total spend by that. Now, one of the things that we can do out in here is we can determine on maybe it's receipt date. So if we're looking at cash flow planning, all of a sudden I can begin communicating this internally to the organization. It doesn't account for terms, but I know basically what I'm going to have to commit to be able to meet this overall plan. One last thing that I'd like to highlight in here as we talk about capacity. Capacity is your ability or your vendor's ability to meet your requirements. We have a number of clients that have large volumes, maybe seasonal product where most of their product, 80% sold in the span of a month or two. It can create quite a significant load on your vendors. We have found that with certain clients, if you're in these deep relationships, understanding when you're placing your orders on them in advance can really give you insight as to, are you meeting or exceeding that vendor's capacity? And we can plan around that. So as much as we're asking our vendor to respond with a bit of information from the vendor on their capacity and availability, we can begin understanding what demand we're placing on them as well. Let's get into key takeaways, Tim, and we only have a couple of minutes here. So if you could go down through here, that'd be wonderful.
So lot of supply chain resiliency conversations over the last couple of years, and by large, having strong relationships with your suppliers and a diversified supply base, right? These two things can really go a long way in developing resiliency. Supply chain risk management, these are assessments you can do and create, across your supply chain. Where is the risk? You should be doing it at supplier level, but you should be doing it also at other either distribution points in your supply chain. Obviously, key tenet supply chain, increase the visibility, right? That actually can provide real-time data around inventory, order status, shipping, delivery schedules, building, of course, anything you can do to build, improve agility and flexibility, and then innovation, right? This is one of the areas with your suppliers that, you should really be exploring, right? How can we mitigate risk given your supply chain, your business goals, my supply chain, my business goals, moving forward?
Great. Thank you, Tim.
You
Much
bet.
appreciated. So we have another event coming up. Part 4 is scheduled for Wednesday, May 3rd at 11. You will be receiving the information in the slides and the recording out in here. If you have interest in further demonstrations, etc., please reach out. We do a demonstration of StockIQ every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And then lastly, if you have any questions, certainly feel free to reach out to Tim or myself. It's always a pleasure to connect, answer further questions.